3, 2, 1. Up and go. Hello, Internet, and welcome back to another Paper Cuts podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Brando Castro, and joining me today on this week's podcast is the divine Mark Mercury. How you doing again, Mark?
Doing great. How about you?
Fantastic. The comic is good. It's the Force. Dan Jackman. Divine Dan Jackman. How are you doing, Dan?
I'm doing super duper over here.
You look comfortable.
I'm so comfortable. That is the epitome of everything, of being comfortable, man.
It's beautiful, man. It's beautiful. On his right is our newest gentleman, James Manderson. How are you doing, Jim?
What's going on, Brando?
You doing all right?
Yeah,
All right.
feeling good.
That's good to see. And last but not least, Sex Machine, Matthew Chang. How you doing, Matt?
Always good.
Every time I call you Matt, I die with one side.
Why does he get to be the sex machine?
Yeah, we had to share Divine.
God.
You had to share Divine?
Mm-hmm.
These adjectives will be distributed communism style next time. Go on.
Alright.
But yeah.
God, why do you guys have to be such
You work in
haters?
the cement factory.
Okay, let's not provoke anything, gentlemen. All right. So for this week's topic, you love them, you hate them, but you need them. Supervillains. We'll be addressing supervillainy in comicdom. We want to talk about our favorite villains, our least favorite villains possibly, worst villains possibly, and we will talk about a third villain, each of us just presenting our cases for villainy in comic books, analyzing them, talking about them with you guys today, and seeing what you guys think. We'll start in order. Each of us will take 3 villains out, and we'll move along. So I'll begin the process with what I believe to be one of the most overrated villains in comicdom, Darkseid. Darkseid for DC Comics. I have somewhat of an opinion on him as I've come to know him. I really don't feel like he's a good villain. This is a negative opinion if you couldn't tell from the intro. I feel like his character is as flat as a 12-year-old boy. He's got a really boring character design, just like a very flat, static, gray, bodysuit looking skin to himself, rock skin. I just don't feel like it brings any flair. I'm not saying you need flair as a villain, but I personally I get nothing from him when I look at him besides this loose attempt at an omnipotent personality. And I just feel like he's so criminally overrated because most of the times that he's defeated, it's usually under self-destruct terminology. When he wrote the algorithm, and this is spoilers I suppose, but I don't think anyone cares about a Darkseid storyline personally, where he writes the algorithm to remove humanity's freedom. He writes in the word freedom in the algorithm, which is the kind of the impetus for his own demise. And I feel like any villain that kind of writes their own failures kind of just diminishes all the valiant efforts of the heroes, and that just makes it for a really boring plot. So I hate Darkseid. Do any of you concur with me?
I completely concur with you.
Fantastic. All right.
Darkseid's just... There's no character depth to him. I mean, maybe because he's a new god, he has no humanity, but he's...
Oddly enough, that's like his scrounging personality right there. Like the only thing about him that is like vaguely interesting is his like loosened association with the new gods.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's like the most feared math nerd in the galaxy. Yeah, he's just so plain, man.
Yeah.
So plain.
God, you fucking dweeb!
Yeah,
Nerd! God!
That's what I would call him if I saw him.
I half agree.
You half agree?
Yeah.
Okay.
I understand where you're coming from, and the way he's used is definitely just like the generic big bad. You know,
Yeah.
like they throw him into the story, and it's just like, okay, Darkseid showed up. Like you knew that was coming eventually.
Yeah.
It's like the Joker popping up in a Batman story or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's like the way they use him constantly changes. Like the Jack Kirby version, like the old school one, is completely different from who and what he is today. So it's like everything, I guess it kind of changes based on who's using him and why, and also like what the anti-life equation is this month. That changes way more than he does. You know, like I don't even know that he made it back in the day. You know?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, it's been a very dirty evolution for him, and I usually give everything Jack Kirby touches my wink and nod to at least give it a little more time of analysis. But as time, Darkseid's been around for forever, so like from what I've seen in his comic book stories, strictly, it's been rather bland. He's had decent representation, I feel like, in other media forms, like in his films. He was like the main villain in Justice League's New Introduction 52, which was decent.
War?
Yeah, War. Yeah, well, War and the comic as well.
Dude, let me tell you what, he's so fucking boring no matter what, okay? He goes and he comes out of like subspace on his fucking boom tube. He sends his parademons everywhere. I am so fucking sick of parademons at this point. The stupid fucking red goblin motherfuckers in gold armor. How much like more generic and bland? They're like super powerful, but they're not super powerful. You know, he doesn't even move. He doesn't need to move at all. He stands on a platform and he like hovers towards everyone. He fucking just like, I don't need to do anything. Now, this is kind of like Galactus almost, but like Galactus fucking destroys this guy in every way. This guy eats planets.
Yeah.
Darkseid, he fucking just floats places, goes and points at them, and then he shoots eye lasers that follow around in fucking 90-degree directions. It's just stupid. Sorry, go ahead.
I guess I'm in the minority here. I actually should have liked Darkseid.
Get out.
Fine. But in all honesty, I like him because he's not really kind of flushed out. And
I like him because he's incomplete.
Not necessarily.
Is that a joke about the rock skin?
But he's not like overly looked at. He's not someone completely written about that we have an entire backstory to, that we can see inside and out, that they really continue to go into, creating him as a sort of enigma, someone that's like not touchable even. As you said, he's a new god, and a lot of the new gods aren't really written about too much, unless we're talking about Godhead now, which is revolving around them. But even in the storyline right now, they haven't really shown Darkseid. They've only mentioned him, making him, maybe one of the last mysterious super villains out there that have been around for.
You scrounge a lot more mystique out of that character than I do. And I can respect that, but yeah.
I'm just a brighter side.
I think
brighter side.
I gotta disagree with you there. He has had origins. He's had them done a couple times. I think his real name's like Uxas or something. They've come up with these long background stories for him. He's had a couple origins. He had the New 52 one in the Earth 2 villain special or whatever, the Justice League, I forget. In one of the villain specials, they had his origin, and you want to know what? I can't remember it. It was that boring. That's the reason we don't think he has a history, is because we can't remember it. He has had good stories like Rock of Eternity, but generally he's like kind of the bland doomsday threat.
I'm surprised how much time we spent on Darkseid.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. For another time, we're moving on. So, in my Rose Gallery, the honorable mention, if you will, of my list is Dr. Otto Octavius. Dr. Octopus. He was almost my number one. And this is just purely off my experience in comics. Most of my comics, as you gentlemen know, involve the webhead. So seeing Doc Ock is like second nature almost to me when I open a book. So I really feel like he has a strong presence as a character. When I think of villain, I have like a lot of predispositions about what they need to achieve. I feel like they have to have some sort of nature of cunning to kind of like their intelligence and their deceptive nature. I kind of like a character that has at least an interesting, when I say interesting, it's also subjective, but unique, we'll say, unique design and aesthetic. And I And even though he's just a man with 4 extra limbs, it's just the way that he implements them that makes his aesthetic more interesting, and the way it you know, in some storylines affects his mind. You know, he has trauma where he can't function without his extra 4 limbs, and it's all this interesting stuff. So I just feel like he's a very cool character. He's had some amazing feats. You know, everyone knows currently Superior Spider-Man, where he succeeds in quote-unquote killing Spider-Man, only for him to somewhat come back. I really enjoy his persona when he's on. I feel like he has a strong stage presence when he's on the panel, and he's on this honorable mention because I wish I could have put him first. He's not. He's done a lot of despicable things. He married Aunt May. Damn May.
He did.
That horrible human being. When I remember that, I almost wanted to put him at number 1, but I couldn't do it. So, also, fuck you, Mark Mercury. Alright.
I didn't say anything.
Oh,
I like Dr. Octopus.
Oh, yeah.
Just not in Spider-Man 2.
Yeah.
It's all about that sick-ass bowl cut, man. All about that.
It hurts me inside. You guys have anything to say about Doc Ock before we move on?
He's an awesome villain, purely for Superior Spider-Man.
You piece of shit.
That's right. I love the way he goes and he like fucks up Peter's life and ogles the shit out of Mary Jane, and is generally awkward and trying to like be a better Spider-Man than him.
Awkward.
Yeah.
Why do I surround myself with gentlemen? Alright. You look at you had something to say, Chang. Nothing? No?
No, absolutely nothing.
Fantastic.
I think
The
he's
only
a
Doc
really,
Ock I know is from Spider-Man 2.
I think he's a
And
really
you don't even care.
No.
he's a really offbeat character, and that's part of what I like about him. You know, how many villains are like kind of chubby dudes with, you know, a bowl cut, like you're saying. It's really like classic Ditko design there, and really is one of the best parts of that really offbeat early era of Spider-Man.
Yeah, definitely he has that sort of... He has Bronze Age all over him, so... And I love it. But not as much as I love my number 1 pick, my greatest villain. The guy I see the most when I read comics, and it hurts me so much. Norman Osborn / the Green Goblin. I love him. I hate him. I mostly hate him, but that's why I love him. It's mostly... the reason he kind of tops the list for me, mostly just because of my personal experiences with the villain. Seeing him most out of any villain kind of puts a really strong indentation into the brain. But besides my experiences, I just feel like he has this intimate relationship with his adversary, with his hero, that most other quote-unquote mainstream Image, Dark Horse, DC, Marvel heroes don't really have. I mean, aside from, okay, maybe a few, maybe like Batman and Joker, but I feel like Goblin Norman kind of has a relationship that I kind of draw parallels to with the Batman. I feel like he's somewhat of like a Joker mixed with Lex Luthor. The way he is like the stout, cunning businessman, at the same time he's also the devious and deceptive and psychotic Green Goblin. And I feel like he has all these wonderful winning qualities as far as a villain is concerned when he kind of just does these despicable acts. He has a rap sheet that is just insane. Most of my clip notes were just acts that he did. If you look at this, all this stuff I have here is just despicable things that he's done just to remind me of how I feel. And I was supposed to write good notes with constructive thoughts, but I'm just gonna run off emotion, which is basically like, you know, the way he just does all these really intricate personal ploys against Peter. You know, when he has Aunt May, where he hires an actress to fake Aunt May's death, where he kills Gwen Stacy, or apparently in original Sins Past, Sins Past, apparently had an affair with Gwen Stacy and had children. You know, all these horrible things. And I just think about it. He tortures Peter, wants him to become the Goblin Heir. He just fucks his life up for so many years. And also, you know, becoming a bigger threat than New York City, becoming like an Avengers level threat, you know, establishing the Dark Avengers and bringing down S.H.I.E.L.D. and kind of taking a place in the government after the Skrull invasion. But yeah, that's my number 1 villain. He embodies everything I love. The persona, the chaos, the order, the ambitious man. And he has a fairly interesting character evolution where he like begins in a very like simple place, just trying to like become a bigger crime boss, but then he also, you know, has ambitions. You know, he has a rise and a fall. When he meets his wife, he kind of comes to a light place, but after she passes, she goes straight down to the dark, and it's nothing but bad shit from there on. I could see you more. What was that?
I just wanted to say we're listing a lot of the like bad stuff he's done. You know, he killed Peter's girlfriend. He's really been pretty terrible. But he even attacked us. He made us read that Clone Saga. Look behind that.
Look, man, the 90s were an interesting time, and I feel like that's also on his rap sheet for many reasons. But you think about it, I mean, he, after the Gwen Stacy incident, which I feel like a lot of people put the period on the Silver Age and kind of inducted the Modern Age because, like, I mean, I wouldn't say it was, but I really do feel like it was an event where a comic book villain had crossed the line that many other villains hadn't crossed before, personally attacking the hero. Where he kills the main love interest or someone that close to the hero and damaging them to that point, you know, internally, morally. And after that, the 90s inducted like a little strange time because he disappeared for a while because he was supposedly dead, you know, after the fight with Spidey and the glider impaling him and all that jazz. And
he was Scryer.
Yeah, but then like that's where Sins Past came in because I mean that storyline was published in 2004, and because supposedly he went away to Europe, and like in the 90s that's where we get the Clone Saga and a lot of other things where he comes out saying he was the one that orchestrated the Clone Saga and all that nonsense, and like you wonder where he's been all this time. He was just kind of apparently recuperating in Europe, and that's probably why he went to Europe because apparently prior to Gwen Stacy's death he had an affair with her in Europe. And it might have been like, it has a lot of strange context as to why he killed Gwen Stacy and why he went back to Europe to kind of foil his children to kill Spider-Man. But yeah, what is up, Mark?
Who were his children with Gwen Stacy? I've
They're
never heard of that
The Grey
before.
Goblin.
No.
I'm not fucking with you. I'm not fucking with you.
He has two children with Gwen, a girl and a boy. I believe their names are Sarah and a guy who becomes Grey Goblin. I'm sorry, I've read Sins Past in at least 10 years. But yeah, 7 months prior to Gwen Stacy's death, she has children with Norman, because when she goes away to Europe, she has an affair with Norman, apparently, in Europe, and they're born, and the children, because Norman has like the serum in his blood, the children are affected by that, and they grow rapidly. That's how they're able to attack Peter like 5 years later. But it kind of ruins and like messes with like one of the characters. Like what that did for me Sins Past, besides being a really odd storyline for me, it like diminished my mental image of Gwen Stacy as being like this character that was like so pure and rather like purely innocent, who had just been killed off by like this extremely evil entity. It ruined her for me, which is something that I just blame the Goblin on. I'm like, I relegate all my hate to that character, so I'm like, even though I should be blaming writers and, you know, idealists, and I was like, fuck, it's you, Norman Osborn, piece of shit. So.
I think he's just cool because he's fucking batshit crazy, personally.
Yeah, dude.
Just because he is so effective at destroying Peter's life and just being generally crazy. Like, oh, this is another way I'm gonna go and fuck over Peter Parker today. Yeah. It is absolutely wonderful. That I can't scrub Willem Dafoe out of my head as the Green Guy. He's like, Peter. This is fucking like presentation of how he actually works. Feels so accurate, especially when he starts talking to himself in the mirror, and you see his like split personalities, because he doesn't start off as like fucked up and evil, you know. He eventually splits, especially due to that serum. So he ends up being much cooler because of it.
Yeah, I do give Willem Dafoe and Sam Raimi and that film a lot of props for what it achieved as Green Goblin. And that's another thing you said. You know, you love his psychotic nature. He's a very multifaceted hero, or villain rather, where he has so many layers that you can just kind of grab at any of them and kind of find your own place with him. You might love that psychotic nature about him. Some people might love the ambitious businessman, cutthroat, you know, ploys that he involves, where he like tricks the president into believing that, you know, he's protecting him from a Green Goblin and becoming the national head of security. You know, it's all these sort of different aspects of him that make him such an interesting villain to me. But I think that's it on comments from myself. A lot more time to spend on that than I expected.
We're moving on. Mark, regale us with your massive paperwork. I can tell that we're going to spend equally as amount of time with you as you did with me.
I'll try and run through this as quick as possible, but I don't know. So my most overrated villain is Doctor Doom.
Oh, God.
Now I hate to say this because I actually really like Doctor Doom, but for the past 10 years or so, since really Mark Waid left Fantastic Four, Doctor Doom has just gotten the shit kicked out of him time and time again. I mean, he got humbled by his masters in Millar's run. He was killed off unceremoniously in the Ultimate Universe, where he always kind of sucked anyway. Tony Stark arrested him. His nation was destroyed by Morgan Le Fay. He was manipulated by Norman Osborn and then tossed away by the Sentry. He had his intelligence removed and just kind of became a simpering caretaker to a 3-year-old girl. He had this master plan in Matt Fraction's run, and Kang took it over. He's really just been humiliated time and time again, most recently when Sue Storm beat him down alone. He's really just... He's become this kind of character that if you want to show someone's tough, you have them beat him up. So he's gotten beat up more in the past 10 years than pretty much in the character's history. I also really... You were talking about how great Willem Dafoe was for Norman Osborn. And let's talk about how in the worst part of those pretty awful Fantastic Four movies was Julian McMahon's Doctor Doom.
Oh, why Julian McMahon?
I mean... Why did they give him those electrical I don't know. Anyway.
It's... You go ahead. I'll finish when you finish.
Sure. And, I'm sure that the next one's going to do a lot better. I mean, I hear he's going to be a totally elite hackster or whatever, so that's going to be great, I'm sure. In a certain way, he was never really as cool as he was cracked up to be. I mean, the Fantastic Four fight alien empires, omnipotent rulers of antimatter universes, mutant kings of undersea empires, and subterranean hordes of monsters. Doom's like an Eastern European dictator. Like, who that fought Annihilus is going to be scared of, like, Alexander Lukashenko wearing a hoodie and a suit of armor? Like, he doesn't rate as high as he does. Brando, go ahead, man.
Yeah, I don't concur, unfortunately. I don't extremely disagree with you, but I just feel like I have a very different mental image of Doom in my head. And like you said, in the past 10 years, he's had shit representation, but I don't mean to wound you twice in one day, but I feel like anyone who is forced to be associated with the Fantastic Four is sandbagging their career heavily as a character and as a writer, because they get such poor representation in all forms of media. Film, it's been like a rough ride. Comics, they always have these wacky ass cartoons where like they just can't. And Doom is a hard character, I feel, to adapt. Like the armor and the aesthetic and like the way he looks is really hard to adapt to real life, like in live action. I don't blame the opinion that you have of the live action Fantastic Four. I think it was a piece of crap as well, but I just still feel like Doom has a lot more going for him, and then being an overrated sort of character. I mean, he still had many good feats in his, I guess we'll call it right now, his prime, since he's on a bit of a downward spiral. Being the king of Elveria, being more or less the main villain of Secret Wars, becoming a divine entity more than once, And he doesn't he come out on top with Morgan Le Fay, or does he get his body? Does he get body?
Yeah, he has to go run to Osborn, where Osborn brings his Avengers and saves his ass. So if you want some props for your number one guy that's because he won when Doctor Doom couldn't.
I know that they were part of some sort of secret council with Doom and Emma Frost.
Yeah, and Osborn was overseeing it all, and Loki was kind of manipulating him.
Loki,
And
Loki looked like a girl then.
Yeah. He was a she.
Yeah.
I mean, he had to be let out of jail by Norman Osborn because Iron Man put him there like he was some second-rate villain. Like he was Whiplash or something. And, that's not the same Doom that fought Iron Man and went back to, like, King Arthur times with him in the 70s and was cool as hell. It's just not.
Yeah, it has been a bit of a downturn. Daniel?
I think Doom is... He's kind of goofy. He's just super, super goofy all the time. He kind of speaks in the third person. He lives in a castle. I remember watching this old, episode of Fantastic Four where he's just like, break through my indestructible door, and the thing goes and busts through the wall right next to the door. He's like, haha, great. Scott, Doom, you're fucking great.
I mean,
speaking great.
even his name kind of sounds like something that like a 5th grader would come up if you told him to come up with a supervillain. He'd be like, Dr. Doom? You know, it's not really...
I think that's like one of the big reasons why they use him as such a big fucking punching bag. Because like, well, if you beat up a guy who's named Doom, I guess you could beat up anyone really, because it's Doom over here, you know? Like, even like Scott Lang, fucking Ant-Man beat the fuck out of him in FF. That was so grand. I enjoyed that thoroughly. What's up, Chang? What's up?
Well, I would agree actually. Like, it doesn't matter what form of media he's in. The fighting game community also, we make fun of Dr. Doom in the game all the time. Bingo lasers, like, what kind of attack is that? But it's just, no matter what form he takes, he's just went from this kind of just dominating warlord to just an absolute joke. And it's gonna take a lot to bring him back, I feel.
Go in.
Everything about... I agree with pretty much everything that everybody said, even though some of it conflicts. You know?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Yeah, I know, it sounds crazy, but like everything about the Fantastic Four and Doom as an extension of them is just to me like hardcore 1960s pop culture. You know, you have like that space age vibe to everything that the Fantastic Four is doing. You know what I mean?
Which I love, but...
Yeah, it's awesome, but at the same time, they wrestle with never really wanting to change that. You know, the spirit of adventure and challenging the unknown and all that stuff. And then trying to keep it relevant and updated and interesting, interconnected with the rest of the universe.
Right.
And Doom, a lot of times people drop the ball with that too, because, you know, like you said, he's just his fist shaking, you know, like... I was never sure, like, if his mouth is supposed to move when he talks or anything like that, you know, like, yeah, without a doubt. And the fact that I was always impressed by the fact that he ruled his own sovereign nation. You know, I think that that's really unique, like, in supervillains. Like, he didn't steal a country from anybody temporarily. Like, he's rightfully the ruler of Latveria. You know, like, yeah.
Wonderfully concise, John. James, why did I call you John? What the hell? But... moving on, Mark. You're next.
So for my honorable mention, I also went like Brando with my kind of second favorite here, and I went with Loki. And it was kind of hard choice, but I had to bump him down to number 2. He's kind of the perfect Shakespearean villain. He has a lot in common with Richard III or Iago in Macbeth. He's like that whole royal intrigue thing. In fact, he's kind of got it going on like with the historical evil monarchs or evil relatives of monarchs. He's like the actual Richard III, or particularly King John, the way he was always scheming against his father and later his brother to take control of the throne until eventually his brother died. And it's the parallels between King John of England and Loki are really unending, so you know that there's a lot more of a grand context for a villain like him than many of them. Plus, he's kind of the mastermind behind all the biggest stuff in the Marvel Universe. I mean, the whole Thor origin story was incited by his actions. The founding of the Avengers, that was him. The Avengers Defenders War, him. Acts of Vengeance, he masterminded that. Dark Reign, he was pulling Osborn's strings the whole time. Siege, he arranged it all. In the awesome comic Siege Loki by Kieran Gillen, you really see how he's masterminded a lot of the Marvel Universe.
I didn't hear Ragnarok on the list.
I see, another great example. And he's also kind of right, because I don't know if you ever read Neil Gaiman's Sandman, but when the Loki in that, it's like, you know, he's surrounded by a bunch of brash, you know, Norse gods who are kind of mean-spirited bullies with the exception of Balder. And he's like this clever guy that tries to think of clever ways around things, and he's a lot more modern than the rest of them in a certain way, so you kind of sympathize with the guy. And lastly, it's because in the past couple of years he's successfully changed from being a villain to being a more stand-up guy over the course of Kieran Gillen's run on Journey into Mystery and then Young Avengers. You saw him use this very convoluted plot to basically stop being regarded as a villain by the public at large and start being regarded by a hero, but in the process he stops Osborn, the Serpent, Nightmare, Doctor Doom, and Surtur. I mean, you know, he went from being the threat against whom the Avengers united to being a member of the Avengers, or at least the Young Avengers. So now with Loki, Agent of Asgard, he's pretty much a straight hero. He's done a complete face turn, and so Loki gets a lot of respect in my book.
Yeah, that was gonna be my first question. I've gotten a lot of intrigue towards Loki, Agent of Asgard, but I don't really know what the premise is.
He's basically just being a secret agent for Asgard, but I guess that was kind of
implied.
Yeah, but
slightly.
But basically, the original Loki's mind has taken back over the reformed Kid Loki's body, and but he's still trying to be a good guy because he remembers how Kid Loki was treated.
Yeah,
and so he's doing his best to do good, but he does it in an evil way, and it when compared to the old Loki, who's kind of become one of his nemesises due to time travel stuff, which is always convoluted, but it really, it highlights how much the characters change.
Yeah, it's a fascinating dichotomy between his own internal struggles of growing up and having to face the actual physical manifestation of his old personality. So,
right,
very interesting. Daniel, were you about to say something?
I personally just like Loki just because he draws in all the ladies and they keep on giving Marvel that sick-ass cash.
Oh, you mean Tom Hiddleston.
Yeah, Tom Hiddleston as Loki. It's the greatest thing ever. He goes, he plays such a poignant villain, because you really go and you feel for him. He's like, he is kind of like the bastard son. He is the fucked up brother, Thor is always awesome. Thor's the greatest. Loki's the piece of shit, Loki can't do anything. Loki doesn't go on adventures and go and drink mead and, do battles and hang around with the Warriors 3 and bang Sif. No,
he studies sorcery alone by himself.
Yeah, he is like the classic nerd who's just like, I am actually much smarter than you, Thor, so go fuck off,
Yeah.
Bouncing off of what he just said, after the Avengers, the entire public mainstream audience in America, everybody glomming onto Loki as being this amazing character, everybody being attracted to his story and that performance and stuff. One of the biggest surprise upsets in comic culture in recent history.
Yeah, absolutely.
I could not believe seeing that many people attracted to that specific character. Not like there's anything wrong with the character, he rules. But it's you never think that you're going to see one of those old school Marvel, like you said, Shakespearean characters, you know what I mean? Have the entire country, paying attention to them and stuff. That was crazy. And it hasn't ended yet. I don't think they're done with him in the movies yet.
No, they said he's going to be in the next couple Thor and Avengers, so.
Awesome. I imagine he'll persist until, I hope, like I said, that he dies in Thor Ragnarok, that they end him.
They're whispering.
What?
Oh shit. Plotting against us.
Okay,
schemers.
We are scheming over here, but what ho, we must continue. Mark!
Yes,
finish your tenure. We must continue.
My greatest villain is, hands down, Lex Luthor. Now, everybody knows I'm more of a Marvel guy than a DC guy, but my favorite here is going to a DC hero, a villain. Now, so first off, he's just a human dude who's going up against Superman, who's pretty much God. So, and he holds his own. He's an automatic badass. The other thing I really like about him is that Superman is derived from this idea, vaguely, through a lot of convolutions, of the Nietzschean Overman or Ubermensch. And in a way, I think that Lex Luthor actually more perfectly embodies the original Nietzschean Ubermensch than Superman does. He's someone who uses the dint of his mental will to set him above the herd, which is, I think, how Nietzsche describes it. And, obviously a lot of people, including Nazis, glommed onto Nietzsche, even though he didn't like them very much, or German nationalists at all. But I think the idea that two Jewish Americans, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, created this character as kind of a counterpoint to their Superman as being more delineated as Nietzsche's Superman is very poignant. Now, he's also kind of the all-American villain in that he changes to match whatever we fear the most. In the 30s and 40s, he was the leader of a society that was bent on starting a general war in Europe, which, is exactly what Hitler and Mussolini and Stalin were trying to do at the time. And during the Cold War, when we were all afraid of nuclear annihilation carried by rockets and whatnot. He became a mad scientist because we were afraid of all our weapons getting out of control and wiping us out. Now, after the Cold War cooled down in the mid-'80s with Glasnost and Crisis on Infinite Earths happened, he became a corrupt businessman. This is the same time we're seeing Gordon Gekko and The Wolf of Wall Street, we're seeing Reaganomics hit big, and George H.W. Bush. And so, really having a corporate villain very much suited those times. After the election of 2000, which was highly contested, and, there were wiretaps and the Patriot Act, Luthor became president. And you kind of start to see this, people were more afraid of the government, so Luthor started to represent the government. Now we're in an age where Google makes robots for the military, and Facebook is trying to manipulate your emotions based on what posts it sends you. And so he's become, once again, this kind of businessman, but also a kind of technological businessman. I mean, there's a lot similar between his representation in Grant Morrison's Action Comics and someone like Mark Zuckerberg. And so I think he kind of shifts to change whatever we're afraid of the most in our society. While I'm on the topic, I mean, he's the best part of any Superman movie he's in. Gene Hackman, Michael Rosenbaum, Kevin Spacey, they were all the best part of their respective Superman movies or shows. He's kind of one of the more interesting things about Superman. And I think that why that is because he's absolutely right. I mean, any other sci-fi story, if you have an all-powerful alien land on Earth and win over the hearts and minds of most of the population, except for one brave scientist who hatches a plot to defeat him, that scientist would be the hero and the alien would be the villain. The Superman-Luthor dynamic is really the only case where that's completely reversed. I think Luthor just has a lot going for him as a villain, and he does it all without ever putting on a mask or a cape.
He drops it. He's done. And
That was beautiful, Mark.
James,
All right.
you were the first.
Incredible. Absolutely awesome, man. I mean, especially what you said initially when you started talking about Luthor as the Superman, the Nietzschean Overman. I was like, you got it, man. Especially in recent years. I'm not necessarily sure if anybody started out writing him that way. I don't think that they were injecting tons of Nietzschean philosophy into comic books in the 50s and 60s and stuff like that. But especially recently, I think maybe at first storylines like Red Sun. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have basically people, you can tell if you read into it a little bit, they're doing Superman versus Superman. You know what I mean? Here's an actual human being who is, you could call him post-moral. You know what I mean? Obviously, it's a comic book. He's a supervillain. He's presented as evil. But, the reason he hates Superman so much in modern times is always presented as, Superman is just inherently Superman. You know what I mean? He came down as an alien and can just do all these amazing things. Whereas here I am, a human being, self-overcoming, you know what I mean? You detract from the human race's ability to overcome their own shortcomings because you give us a shortcut, that is crazy, crazy stuff,
Someone that succeeds on their own, like Luthor, will never be as good as someone that just arrived perfect, like Superman.
It's not fair.
Yeah.
It's not fair, you know what I mean? And even though he's a complete lunatic, for whatever reason he uses it as justification to, kill billions of people, whatever he happens to be doing, it's pretty good pathos, especially for a supervillain, Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Deal with his omnipresent, omnipotent personality.
Only other thing I wanted to throw out there real quick, with the original Superman story, not many people talk about this, but the original Superman story was a short piece, you know what I mean? Before they wrote him as a comic book character, which is really similar to Lex Luthor. Even old school depictions of Lex Luthor, of somebody drinking a potion and becoming a Superman for a day, you know what I mean?
Right.
Which was directly based on a play that was about Nietzsche's Superman. You know what I mean?
There you go.
It's the original
it's
Superman.
There's almost a direct line from Nietzsche to Superman.
Yes.
And so there very well could have been in the 30s or 40s some level of that being layered on the Luthor.
That was incredibly thought out and hit the point,
On the
nail on the head. Lex Luthor is also one of my favorite villains, and it's also because of the fact that he is, always intelligent. He's always somebody who has his mind about him. We go on, and I'm sure there's going to be individuals from the Batman's Rogue Gallery, but a major point of a lot of those villains is that they are crazy. There's something crazy about them, even with like Brando, top villain, the Green Goblin. Nothing against him, but he does have that crazy side about him, which kind of puts him really high on the villain chart for a lot of people.
Talk smack chat.
Also kind of hinders the other part of him of just being an intelligent individual.
I wouldn't
just
agree with that.
Wanting to do evil. Not necessarily because it is evil, but because it's something that they feel they should do.
Right.
It's not something that the everyday person really can question. Like, a lot of people know Luthor does questionable things, but because of his kind of rank in society, he's not touched by it. He's kind of this other Superman.
Like I said, stands above the herd. Yeah.
Right. He created his own image as being something as grand as Superman, something that the other normal people cannot touch, and he did that through hard work and just being a smart human.
Definitely concur. Just a really quick note. My boy Goblin, when he's going through his sort of Luthorian age, he kind of has a perception that he really wants to make the world in a perfect image, which is kind of like almost copycat of Luthor, but I feel like it doesn't diminish his character. I feel like it just adds to it. Daniel, what are you gonna say?
I don't know. Luthor for me has always been kind of like a whatever villain. Like, I understand that he goes and he's a really, really smart guy, and he tries to overcome Superman because he is Superman and he is so great. But I remember like seeing one of his original origins, which is something like Luthor used to have long locks of red hair, and then something that like Clark Kent did caused him for his like red hair to go and fall. And it's like, "Curse you, Superman! I'm coming for you now! Fuck your face!" This. He was kind of like goofy, so it's like I kind of get away from the whole millionaire, I'll fuck you over thing. I mean, he definitely has like his own place as far as like he became president, Becoming president is fucking crazy. Like, we can go unknowingly vote for this motherfucker, full well knowing like he's evil, guys. You gonna vote for him?
I just want to let you know, Lex Luthor didn't actually become president in 2000. That's.
I'm just gonna put out
this right now. Can't be too mad at the American voting public for that one.
Yeah.
You
voted him in, motherfuckers.
I would vote for him.
Oh,
well, Luthor for president. It's coming up.
All right, thank you, Mark. That was absolutely fascinating. And we're moving on. Daniel, tell us your villains, your choices.
Well, if I'm gonna go with most hated, most biggest trash villain of all time currently.
Wow. This is heavy.
Oh, fucking pisses. Imagine you are the holder of a red ring.
Oh, Jesus.
And this red ring allows you to feel a great rage within. Absolute hatred. Imagine with each fiber of your body, you go and you spit molten blood over everything, and you live next to a big blood lake. Meet Atrocitus, who truly is one of the biggest fucking atrocities in the Lantern universe. He's awful fucking character. So he's originally a guy named Atros, and his whole sector is killed, which is Sector 666, by the way. Most retarded naming for a sector ever. And, after that, he gets so angry, so he goes and he finds weird space demons, which, he feigns love with one of the weird space demons, and he bangs the shit out of it, and then he kills all of them and uses their blood to go and form the Red Lantern. And then afterwards, it's just like, okay, so now his entire goal is to go and destroy all those who have done wrong. So he's come kind of like weird reverse superhero while being an evil asshole at the same time. But, he never expands at all. He's always just like, I feel a great rage inside. It's all about his personal quest to go and destroy people who are wrong, because he can never get off himself, okay? Just never ever. They believe there's this like one part where one of the Guardians is the one responsible for sending all the Manhunters to Sector 666 and destroying everything. So he wants to go and destroy him, obviously, and Hal Jordan beats him to a punch. So he goes and he takes the corpse of, the little Guardian, and he keeps it on his planet. And then he talks to it like it's Yorick or something. He's like, I have no friends.
We're very Shakespearean tonight.
Quite Shakespearean. It's awful, man, because he's just like, I have no friends whatsoever. I am a generally awful person. What would happen if I was a good guy? But alas, I cannot talk to the rest of my corpse. I will only talk to you. Strange that I talk to you, my blue friend, because you are the one who tried to go and destroy the universe. How I wish I could have killed you first. It's so fucking annoying to listen to him just monologue to himself, page after page. It's just, let's just fucking talk to ourselves forever, and then after that, he goes and he sends his own corpse off to go and do whatever the fuck, and whenever he goes to that particular planet to go and, avenge them or whatever, he ends up beating the fuck out of them. He's, genuinely a bad guy. He beats up wives, he beats up Blees, he beats up fucking Zilius, Zox, and Scalox, and he's just generally a really, really horrible villain, and I'm so glad he's gone, kind of. He can't even keep his own corpse in check. He is ousted by a Green Lantern who turned red just because he's gonna grow a 6-handlebar, mustache later in the future. His best lantern, his biggest friend in the Red Lantern Corps is a cat named Dexstar, who speaks in weird cat memes. "I good kitty, row." He's just generally frustrating.
I see this is a very, very passionate issue for you, Daniel. I'm glad you got that out. Chang, I know...
You've got a lot of rage here, man.
That's a great rage in my heart.
I see there's a red rig floating around here.
We have a resident Lantern defer to. Chang, what is your opinion on this?
I full-heartedly agree.
Wow, fantastic.
Atrocitus was not meant to rule the Red Lanterns. I remember at one point, he's like, "Is there a traitor amongst me? I must find out. But they all cannot talk. I'm the only Red Lantern that can talk, but I know how I can make them. Take a bloodbath. Okay, you can talk now. Is there a traitor among me? You don't know? Next! He just starts chunking everyone into the bloodbath, so now everyone can remember why they're enraged, which makes the Red Lantern Corps overall far more interesting, because it's instead of being blinded by their rage, they now have some control over it. But at the same time, it just shows how absolutely ridiculous he is, going off on every little thing that happens. Instead of just being an absolute monster of rage, he becomes a kind of a joke that, as Dan said, gets ousted by the first guy who challenges him.
There's a red ragey messiah offering, blood baptisms to go and give you your mind back. That's one thing. When you get the Red Lantern ring, you basically turn retarded until Atrocitus goes well, I can't have an army of rejects following me around who can't think for themselves. Let's go and, be well, my son. I baptize you in blood. Now you can go and think kind of coherently now.
It's not even that cool, though. He literally just starts chucking them in.
Oh, yeah. If they float back to the top, they, pass their trials. You're so cool, man. Fucking Red Lantern Jesus.
They all float, Dan.
Jim, did you have an opinion? You look a little taken back.
I'm perplexed and entertained all at the same time. I mean, I haven't really followed most of the Green Lantern stuff lately, but maybe I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly. Maybe nobody knows, but is Atrocitus a character that Alan Moore introduced in Tales of the Green Lantern Corps way back in the day? I remember there was an Aladdin type story where there was a prophetic being that was
I don't remember him being in it, but I remember practically Necron and a bunch of other characters from Jeff Johns' run being in it.
Yes,
I don't.
Right from that story, and I feel
he
Atrocitus
very well
is the
could have been.
Yeah,
I know they also Moore throws out a lot of names in that too, referencing events that happened in the past for them, but in the future for current continuity or whatever. It might have been something like that. I don't remember him specifically appearing.
Okay.
But then
Gotcha.
again, that was like 5 years ago. I read that. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't recall.
I don't know. In the off case that that is the same character, I will say he was awesome in that. And if it's not the same character, then never mind. I have nothing to say.
Nah, you're fine. All right, Daniel, tell us your second villain.
My honorable mention is Mr. Freeze, Dr. Victor Freeze, and I like him in particular because it's a classic example of taking an old character that was kind of stupid because, you know, Mr. Freeze pretty much had just a really, really stupid costume and an ice ray gun.
Hey, Dan.
And
What killed the dinosaurs?
the Ice Age! Yeah, he's just... that's pretty fucking awful. Take 2 of these. Call me in the morning.
Sorry.
Have we all seen Batman and Robin enough that we can quote this?
I'm
Yeah.
still yet to watch it even.
Oh,
once.
Jim.
I know
Spare
I'm
yourself.
missing out.
No.
No, I want to. It's a life.
It's a great comedy.
It's a classic.
He is like a classic example of taking an old character that just was generally kind of stupid, and of course, you know, it comes from that classic era of Batman, and being updated so masterfully by Paul Dini and company. Maybe Bruce Timm had a hand in it too, into having such a tragic story where, you know, he's a scientist and, you know, his wife contracts a rare disease, so he goes and, you know, puts her in an artificial cryogenic state, you know, and seeing him go and pine after his wife after going through a sick transformation, turning into this being who has this cold heart, who not only in addition to, you know, not being able to feel anything because he's literally frozen, he is frozen emotionally as well. The love of his life is gone. He cannot be warmed in any kind of way. And so it makes him very much the tragic villain. The villain that could have been averted somehow, you know, if only, you know, that dick Bruce Wayne didn't, you know, pull funding from the cryogenics program. You know, seeing him reimagined in that way really goes and brings into, like, man, anything that's shitty can really be rethought up with the similar concept
Absolutely.
and upgraded into something that is hella formidable. You know, not only to mention he's been updated again, and it's in a particular issue. It's Batman #1. It's an annual by Scott Snyder and James Tynion IV, where they actually portray him as kind of a psychopath. You know, he goes and he kills his mother in the issue.
Spoilers.
Yeah, spoilers. Read the fucking comic. All right.
We'll put a nice big spoiler at the front for a lot of what we talk about today.
Yeah. He kills his mother. He goes and he talks about when he was a kid, how he likes to go and like freeze little animals and then go and dissect them and go and see how, like, you know, freezing an arm goes and works. It really shows him as a psychopath. And then even like with his frozen wife, you go like, well, at least he still has the wife aspect. And then they go and they say that, oh, she's originally, you know, cryogenically, she is the first cryogenic person in that sleep. And, you know, he only kind of believed that he was in there because he was driven mad, you know, just over time pining after this person because he's, you know, obsessed with freezing. Overall, you know, he definitely is one of, like, the cooler villains in Batman's Rogue Gallery. He's the cooler.
Yeah. Top of your game today, Dan.
Yeah, right. But that, and he just looks plain fucking cool.
Fantastic. Chang, you've been itching. I can see you. What's on your mind? You're literally itching.
I kind of, I definitely like the new Mr. Freeze a lot more, having more of a psychotic kind of nature to him. But beforehand, I wasn't actually too fond of the whole white frozen tone evil duo because of that. I kind of saw it as just kind of like an escape for him. You know, not really like. Stop me if you heard this before, but because of a tragic incident, my heart is now frozen, and instead of seeking solace, I'm just going to talk to this dead individual here the entire time. Yeah.
No, he's not like Atrocitus. Don't even begin.
So, moving along, I definitely enjoy him being far more psychotic in his nature, and I think it makes him far more of an appropriate Batman villain.
Hello. So you just kind of talk about how Mr. Freeze used to be silly, and that sure was the case. What was he called back in the day? Dr. Zero, Professor Zero, or something?
Yeah.
I don't know. But, and that he was really reinvented by Batman the Animated Series and made darker. I would like to just remind you that in the same episode where they introduced that new origin for Mr. Freeze, Batman defeats him by cracking a thermos full of hot chicken soup over his head. So there's always kind of been the silly element to the character. I mean, he's a guy that has to walk around in a cooler suit. You know, he's...
Refrigerator man.
Yeah, he kind of is. Like, you bet he buzzes when he walks into a room. Like, so, I don't know. There's... Even after they made him more serious, there's always been this kind of silly aspect to him.
Yeah, I guess that's absolutely awesome as far as that goes, just because, you know, you can harken back a little bit. That's good that you mentioned that, because I completely forgot that chicken soup was so powerful.
Any comments?
Overall, though, Mr. Freeze, a great villain. I'd have to say, and I think we can all agree with that.
I'm saving all my commentary for later because he stole my guy.
Okay. Wonderful, wonderful.
Well, we'll get back to that.
All right, and then round out your list for us. Tell us tell us the great and powerful Oz.
The greatest of all villains, in my opinion. And now, you face the Shredder.
Of course.
The
I am
Shredder
super
is
surprised.
absolutely one of my favorite villains of all time. You know, by the way, it's the Shredder from the Ninja Turtles, in case you guys didn't know. He, you know, is the leader of the Foot Clan, which sounds absolutely stupid. But I promise you, if you guys read the secret history of the Foot Clan, you will realize he is a really super cool character. Now, okay, the old guy is, you know, he starts out just, man, I'm really fucking having a hard time collecting my thoughts on the Shredder over here.
It's because he steps over the good people of New York.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what he does.
Because he's so been chef.
He's a Japanese man, alright, who leads the Foot Clan, who's basically a big crime syndicate, this super crazy organization, and is thwarted by mutant turtles, okay? Responsible for killing Hamato Yoshi, who is one of his big rivals, over the love of a woman named Tang Shen, you know, and the pet rat. Well, I don't even know why I'm repeating the story to you. Basically, he's a fucking ninja, and he's awesome, and his new story is probably the best version of Impossible, which is basically, he starts off as a clan member named Takashi.
Whoa, this dude was in the clan?
Yeah, right?
Not cool, man.
That is not cool.
He is in the clan.
We do not condone this in this show. Then tell me why. Why do you love him so much? What makes him stand out as opposed to Freeze or the infallible Atrocitus? Like, what makes him beyond those two? What sets him apart?
It's how timeless he is. Countless time, over and over again, you know, there are so many other villains that the Turtles can go and fight, you know, just different things. But, like, time and time again, there's only one that really comes back, and it's always the Shredder, because
Krang.
yeah, he has claws on his hand. His design is so fucking cool. He's a warrior from feudal Japan, you know. He's been resurrected. He goes and he defeats, like, all these fucking turtles. He has these horrible fucking nefarious plans, and I don't know, I'm just gushing over this because he's just cool.
No, I definitely concur. Yeah, I feel like he has a very strong presence in the storylines where he's extremely inexcusable, like, when he's not there. He's one of those villains that has such a large persona in their own comic that his absence, like, leaves this very gaping void. I would say the same is true for, like, Magneto, Same is true for Joker. Well, Joker not so much. Such a large rogues gallery for Batman, so he can fall back on so many. But he's one of those villains where their absence can be felt. So that kind of relegates to how heavily they relate to the heroes of their comic.
Like in the original comic book, he goes and he dies after issue 1. He dies in issue 1, and then he comes back a few issues later with a whole bunch of weird Shredder clones, and he's made up completely out of these crazy mutant worms, and then he dies, and then he's gone forever from the original Turtles. So you have a character who dies in issue 1 only to be repeated in every other version of the media that exists, just showing how much more he can go and outlast anyone. I challenge anyone to go and say, is there any other Turtles villain I can go and think of? And the answer is probably going to be no. You can only think of the Shredder.
Dude,
Pizza Foot.
Krang, Rocksteady and Bebop.
Yeah, Bebop and Rocksteady with the best.
Hang on. That big ugly turtle.
Slash.
Yeah, there you go. Dig his new album. Dan's gonna strangle me. I'm a little afraid here. But I kind of feel like Shredder's kind of very 80s. There was this whole thing where, we were afraid Japan was going to overtake us in the 80s. So all of a sudden you started seeing a lot of Japanese villains popping up. The Hand in Daredevil. You saw the Silver Samurai and Wolverine. A lot of very similar guys. I mean, if you're not going to tell me that Shredder and Foot don't seem similar to the Silver Samurai and the Hand, I mean, there's a certain kind of generic 80s-ness to it, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, just so much as it is he more falls into a certain archetype of evil ninja lord than stands out as a character on his own. But that might just be because I haven't read enough of the Turtles and I'm primarily familiar with them through
he's kind of
media. That
way at first, and actually the Ninja Turtles are created as kind of a satire towards that. So you mentioned the Hand. Obviously, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird are both big Marvel fans, and so they create the Foot Clan. The mutagen that goes and spills all over the Turtles is the same
stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So there are a few parallels, and of course that origin is kind of his outdated kind of 80s thing, which I definitely agree. He kind of is the villain of the week. He kind of exists to be foiled, but I would go and say in the new IDW series, he really goes and creates a point to why he is so formidable.
Alright, Dan. Thank you for sharing those. Very personal notes. Moving to our fourth commentator. Chang, tell us. Chang, who's the worst? Who ruins your day? And the worst wins.
Underrated or overrated villain in my book, and my least favorite, is Harley Quinn.
Harley Quinn.
A lot of people just have the desire to kill me right
Instantly
now.
full of rage, yeah.
Man, wow. There's a lot of this is not what I expected.
But
not what I expected.
Let me finish
before
absolutely. You
yeah.
stick me on a pike and do a dance around.
But we do get to stick you on a pike, correct?
Only if you feel like it after
Okay.
I'm done. So she was originally created by Paul Dini. Originally from the Joker's Fable. She was actually supposed to only be a one-shot, but her popularity just skyrocketed from one episode. And she became, just 2 years later, a part of the comic, a part of the Joker. She really was. Hands down, great with the Joker, did a lot of evil with him. However, recently with her popularity, they decided to kind of have her go off more on her own. And that is where she dies as a villain. Without the Joker, she no longer has that complete villainous in her. Her acts are more quirky. It causes destruction, causes mayhem. Doesn't outright kill people. She's not a strong villain on her own, and even now she's become more part of Suicide Squad and even Birds of Prey, making her more of an anti-hero and kind of even driving her more towards the hero aspect. And that is why I feel like she's just a bad villain, because she never had a solid kind of villain comic of her, or any kind of media of her just being a straight villain on her own. And even now, she's like fighting against the Joker, and like she's becoming sort of this kind of stand up to abuse kind of comic character.
You say that like it's a bad thing.
No, it is a great thing.
You wife beater.
But it doesn't put her in any kind of villainous light. She's always just been either second fiddle to Joker, or kind of walking that line of being herself, which is psychotic.
What about the whole Harley Ivy dynamic?
Even with that, they didn't really do like straight up like mass murdering of people like the Joker does. It's not on that scale.
And they also bounce her back and forth like a ball. You know what I mean? Like she's jumping from Harley or from Ivy back to the Joker, like back and forth. You know what I mean?
And recently she hasn't even been bouncing to the Joker at all. And she's been starring in her own comic book and stuff, and even that is more cookie fun than anything else. You know, she is psychotic. She definitely has, you know, that kind of Batman rogues gallery psychotic nature about her. But it's just not a villain aspect to me. It's just...
So you feel it's very unbalanced as like a complete villain.
I don't think she was fleshed out as a complete villain ever, being only done in the TV series and always second fiddle to Joker in the TV series. And then now when she's starting to gain her comic footing, they kind of, like James said, bounce her around because they don't know where to put her exactly. And now she's just kind of having her own footing as kind of a hero.
Okay, I can respect that. Jim, you have the footing right now.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with like everything you just said, pretty much. I mean, Harley is probably my favorite like cartoon character ever. Like, I love Harley Quinn, you know, but really only from the animated series. Like, that's it. Like the DC animated universe, I think she's fantastic in that. So like Harley Quinn, as created by Paul Dini, Bruce Timm, and voiced by Arlene Sorkin. Like everything else after that in all media is like she's just an image. That's it, you know, like they don't know what to do with her in the comics or anything like that, you know.
By chance, have you seen Assault on Arkham?
No, I have not. You keep recommending it to me. I haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
I'm skeptical, but I'll take the recommendation.
It's also a really good aspect of Harley Quinn, but like I said, Suicide Squad, they do evil things, but they're not exactly evil.
Right on. Definitely not a villain, ever. Really just more of a character, which speaks to your point.
Absolutely. Okay, I can definitely see that as a valid point. Mark, enter the stage.
I really like you were saying, I really like her on the animated series, and I think that there they really did flesh her out, and I think with the comic that was a tie-in to that, Mad Love, I think they eventually made it into an episode. They do kind of flesh her out as a villain, but like you're saying, kind of subsidiary to the Joker. Now, my only difference would... I don't disagree with anything you said. I just think that maybe she's not the worst villain because she doesn't go on mass murder sprees. I mean, neither does the Shocker, but he's not your worst villain. You know, so I like Harley. I'm sorry, I like Harley.
Don't get me wrong, I love Harley too, but she's my worst villain because
of your definition of villain.
Okay.
Not necessarily
Right,
even my definition. I mean, you don't have to be a mass murderer, but she never quite stood out as her own villain. She was created, you know, as second fiddle to Joker, and she was never quite created to be a villain herself.
Okay.
I think it's an excellent point.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can accept that.
And I was ready to like bite your head off when you
Yay!
said that.
Yeah, fight for you today.
I get to live another day.
Fantastic. Well, Chang, you spared yourself with reasoning and logic. Now let's hope you can continue that spree. What do you have for us next?
Next, I'm actually gonna go on a little bit of a pre-rant because my honorable mention is basically my second from my favorite, and my favorite are kind of alike. And basically because when we decided to do this podcast, I really had to think to myself, for me, what was the best villain? And I actually had to do a lot of soul searching because I was like, what really stood out to me as a villain?
Is it yourself? Is this the M. Night Shyamalan twist?
No, that'd be
it's
great.
really you all along.
Is it Purple
We're
Space
the
Hitler?
villain.
But more or less, it had to be. I think it had to be somebody that chose the villainy, that really created to me what a villain was. Because that right there just destroys all of Batman's because they're psychotic. Some of them don't have a choice on it, Like the Joker, just
Inherently
absolutely
is,
insane. He is, a killer. That's just who he is. He didn't choose it, So, for me, my honorable mention is Sinestro.
Mm.
And he's an honorable mention because he really did choose the kind of style he was, because he believed it would make the world a better place, and he believed, people had to be killed, kind of forcing people to follow the rules. It's very villainy. He's my honorable mention because, well, recently he hasn't quite been that, especially since Blackest Night's kind of been like, oh, everyone thinks I'm a bastard. But look, there's a bigger bastard. Alright, let me go. Get out the tea sets. Here's all the other lanterns. Alright, drink your tea. You all think I'm a bastard, but here's a bastard. We have to beat this bastard. Finish your tea, let's go. So...
A wonderful analogy, thank you. I'm glad I can visualize that.
So he's very become this sort of anti-hero. Very much still a villain in his own right. Even in the last comic issue he was in, blowing up his own corpse members because he believed they weren't good enough to be a Yellow Lantern. So he hasn't diverted from being a villain, but he's definitely more of working for the greater good, I would say.
Mark, what is your inkling? You seem to have something to say.
I feel like the introduction of him choosing to be a villain is a more recent adaptation, not super recent. I just mean it wasn't built into the character when they came up with it in the 60s or 50s or whatever. I remember going to see the Green Lantern movie with a friend of mine and him being very disappointed by the twist at the end when Sinestro turns evil. I mean, he's like, oh, the guy that looks like the devil and his name's Sinestro decides to be evil. Big surprise. So I get what you're saying, and I think that as far as modern Sinestro, it totally holds.
He was originally just created to be like, oh, green, opposite green, yellow, fight each other, good stuff.
Yeah, I don't remember what year he was conceived in it, but yeah, a lot of those Silver Age heroes, or villains rather, just like the reverse world, Professor Zoom, or, fucking whoever else they invented back then.
He just felt like a carbon copy, so I feel like he's the one who's benefited the most from character evolution, especially in the last 10 years or so, with Jeff Johns touching everything and turning it to gold. So,
at least in the Lantern universe.
I mean, money.
Oh, yeah.
The amount of cash he's producing.
In the real world, yes, that too.
Yeah. So, but yeah, metaphorically as well, yeah. He seen his facelift on Sinestro, turning into a sort of relevant / relatable space dictator. Hitler, Mussolini he's the character's benefited greatly from it. Is where you can definitely more dissect him as a layered hero or villain. Damn, we got to fix that. And not as just a flat, anti-villain, anti-character against, yellow, green, he's the opposite, Very much more a full-fledged character, which has been nice to see. Jim, do you have a point? Or no? Okay.
Not really.
I could have swore there was a finger motion flying over there.
I just twitched my fingers.
Oh, you
Sinestro's kind of interesting. He's not really my top guy because he really does have more anti-hero vibes emanating from him than he does anything else. And he is definitely, as you were saying earlier, Brando, kind of space Hitler, so to speak, just because what I believe is the correct way to go. So it's he's a good guy in his own mind, but You know, ultimately, I think he's kind of like self-serving, big dickhole. You know, his daughter is a Green Lantern. You know, he wants to go and help out Kuragar, but everyone on Kuragar thinks he's a dick. You know, generally, he's not too favorable in my head.
Well, you know, those feelings seem to you know, make him seem like a good villain. You know, so I imagine they would want to inspire. But
I want him to be evil, not a dick.
I guess there's a differentiation. But let's round it out, Chang. Tell us what is the big bad?
My favorite villain, this is a bit of a spoiler. Anyone who's reading Fables doesn't want a spoiler, please stop now.
Spoiler! Really? Read Fables. Come back to us, okay?
If you want, I can make time lapse.
Because I have to go up and tell you who the adversary is. And my number one villain in comics today is Geppetto. The mastermind behind it all.
I'm sorry, Jim, you didn't read Fables.
That's okay.
Yeah, I haven't read Fables either.
I'm sorry.
I'm picturing
It
a
ruined
kindly
it.
man with a mustache.
I'm thinking Disney Geppetto. I'm now super interested to read
It
this
is.
stuff. Yeah.
It is Disney Geppetto. The creator of Pinocchio is the adversary.
He's the big
He
bad.
is
Are you telling
the
me he's the
evil.
puppet master?
Oh, yes.
Kill this guy.
Geppetto's story is one of the best, and it's probably because he started out the creator of Pinocchio. He was the Disney father of Pinocchio that everyone kind of sees him for. But in the world that he was in, there was a lot of political turmoil going on. And so a lot of people actually came to him to create a doll to replace the current king that looked exactly like him and have the blue fairy make him human to give like a political stability. And he did this by removing the old political
So basically,
individual.
like making copycat humans that they could control.
Right.
Okay.
And, you know, the times were good. Low taxes, you know, everyone was happy. And he started doing this for a lot of nations. And eventually it went to his head. He said, you know, everyone's happy with what I'm doing in this small scale. Let's make it big. He started, you know, chopping down the enchanted forest, making a whole lot of unstoppable puppets that didn't feel any pain, you know, could be rebuilt. The adversary himself is actually a giant puppet, a wooden puppet that Geppetto continually just maintains. It makes it so that this thing is actually untouchable because it cannot be killed. He just keeps fixing it. And even though he himself doesn't take hand in any of the killing, he knows he's starting to kill. He's killing millions to take over nations. He stopped like just politically assassinating individuals and replacing them with just flat out, you will follow my rules or your nation will fall. And one of the biggest things with him is that he succeeds. He takes over the entire European Fables lands. And a little bit down the road, you figure out that there's Arabian ones, there's a Japanese one, and he starts invading even those. So he very much succeeded in what he was going out to do and was on the verge of just taking over everything, making him one of the most dominating villains to date.
So what about him separates him from the other two? What makes him?
There's one point in the comic. Well, I don't want to spoil too much, but
We're already down the rabbit hole. You can, if you need to.
There's no going back now.
okay.
If you need to.
You know when
he
that
is stopped by the Fables, and people go up to him and, you know, was like, how could you do this? And he just looks them dead in the eye and he says, who are you to judge me?
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was doing so much what he thought was good, and he in his own mind, and maybe it's even true, that the common people don't have the right to judge him because what he did was something that they wanted him to do in the first place, and in the second place was actually doing good. So that right there, like the no remorse, knowing what he did, I guess believing it was for the greater good might be a little bit of a thing to go away from a villain. You know, a villain just maybe sometimes wants to kill people just for the hell of it and knows he's doing evil.
Well, it depends on your personal view.
But just the fact that he looks someone dead in the eye and just is like, you don't have the right to judge what I did, just was so powering to me.
Okay, so you really value his, not his misdirection, but his dedication to his own personal morality.
And like I said, what a villain was somebody who chose it.
Okay.
You know, for one reason or another, he chose to do his actions.
Okay, so you like villains that are very straightforward in their path towards villainy, you know, their beliefs.
No, for me, that's what makes a great villain.
Instead of like an accident, you know what I mean, where they're accidentally turned into what they're doing. They were set on this path by tragedy or something. Somebody just like, no, this
like
is what
I
I'm
said,
doing. Yeah.
The Batman Rogue Gallery, although great, not among my top.
Okay, because so that's why you kept mentioning psychotic. You enjoy a hero, or rather a villain, with a lot of intention towards their villainous acts, with, you know, methodical purposes and whatnot. Did you have something to say? Okay.
I think he's actually like pretty awesome, just for like sheer reason of like he's kind of like a more different Tony Stark. He's like a war profiteer. He doesn't start off as evil. He starts off just, you know, presuming a function, and when he realizes he can go and take over, you know, the land with all the puppets that he's built, and that no one's been paying attention to him because all of the people in the Fables world are selfish dicks and they don't mind when other kingdoms fall, and that ends up being their ultimate demise is like really what makes him appealing. That and the mystery kind of around his build up, like who is the adversary, just trying to go and figure out who that person is, you know, is absolutely wonderful. By the way, Chang, did you know that originally they wanted to go and make the adversary Peter Pan?
I did not know that.
The only reason that they did not choose to do Peter Pan is because Peter Pan still has licensing with the government of Britain. Apparently, every year they go and they raise money through a children's hospital to go and re-license the rights to Peter Pan. So he's one of the few fables that cannot be used openly because he's not in public domain.
I did not know that. That's interesting. That would be an interesting storyline also, but I am most pleased that it is Geppetto.
That really makes me want to read Fables. Like, you guys just like formed up together and made an awesome pitch for that series.
By telling
Read
you the
Fables.
biggest spoiler.
It is the best.
If that's what gets you into Fables, then awesome. Do it.
I'm gonna need to wait a couple years till I forget this conversation and then go back and recommend it to me again.
I pretty much read it as well. I mean, mostly it's just listening to Marty read it aloud to me. I like a fable, huh? But yeah, it's a fascinating story. So I'm not as far as you are possibly, but I pretty much got the gist. So it's wonderfully executed. It's incredibly unique. It's beautiful. It's one of the best comics out there. Everyone should just give that comic a shot.
It's been going for a while now, too,
Yeah.
right? Like,
It's ending soon too.
Okay,
Nice.
interesting.
Almost done.
So.
But thank you, Chang. That was very beautiful. Very nice ideas. Lastly, James, bring us home
Alright.
and go wild. Tell us what you got for us, buddy.
I don't have a worst. I have a hard time beating up on people or characters or anything like that.
That's fine.
Yeah, I'm not so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna defend an extremely hated character, right?
Okay.
And this goes back to like when I first started reading superhero comics as an adult. Like I read them when I was a kid and stuff like that. Took a big old break, and then around 2005, 2006, I jumped back into it in earnest. What was happening at that time was the storyline called Infinite Crisis.
Yeah.
Okay, which blew my mind, right? And the character I'm going after is Superboy Prime.
Oh, jeez.
Okay, super divisive, you know what I mean? Like, everybody's adjusting their posture in the room right now. Right?
Mark's tightening his grip. I am taking the seat back.
I love
resetting my
Superboy Prime.
pike.
I love Superboy Prime. Part of it is because I was like, you know, young and naive and stuff like that when I was reading this stuff, so it was all cool to me. And part of it was just seeing everybody dogpile on this, you know, kid and this event and everything like that. To me, He represents sort of the full flavor of what DC Comics is all about, and reading DC Comics, being a fan of DC Comics for better and for worse. Sort of a yin and yang thing going on with this character, right? Mm-hmm. You know, not to go into the entire convoluted backstory of him, right? But you have a character who was basically supposed to be born in the real world, okay, where we exist as readers and comic books are fictional, right? But he's also Kryptonian because he got shot to the real world from the fictional world, right? Then the original crisis happens, and you know, the multiverse, including Earth Prime, which is the real world, gets destroyed, right? And he's allowed to survive over in this like little tiny pocket dimension, right, where they keep the Golden Age Superman, Superboy Prime, Lois, and then I think
Luthor's son.
Yeah, Alexander Luthor from Earth 3. Yeah. Right. Okay. So whole bunch of goofy characters just chill out there for like ever, right? And then this dude basically comes back into the picture as a continuity bomb. He's like weaponized continuity. He messes everything up and makes his appearance and everything like that literally by punching reality, right? Except it's not reality because comic books aren't real. Except for him because he is, even though he's not because it's a fictional story. So he's, you know, punching the barrier between worlds, and I see the fist coming at my face from the page, you know what I mean? Yeah. And I'm like, he's punching at me. Like, this is interesting, right? And this is what introduced me to this like basically self-cannibalizing and like borderline incestuous relationship that comic book storytelling has with itself. You know, which I think is very interesting. It's what makes it good and bad and weird and unique and enjoyable to me. Everything they did with the character after that series is, again, good and bad, you know. But it's always interesting, you know. So that's basically where I sit with him.
Okay, that's a very interesting case to present for Superboy Prime. I understand where a lot of the torches and pitchforks come from, where like it's very discerning. When a character like that pops into your comic and just kind of shatters the reality you've come to grips with. But I definitely agree with you. It's very interesting and thought-provoking. It's a character that you don't usually expect unless you're reading Deadpool. And it's very interesting. So, I mean, he definitely is a little more validated because of those words, so I appreciate that. Word, Daniel?
Yeah, I think he's much cooler than initially let on. Like, just Brando was saying earlier, initially it was just like, oh, so he punched the fabric of reality and that was it. But then through listening to your points, it's like, wow, he actually sounds much, much cooler than I gave him credit for. I almost kind of want to go and reread some Superboy Prime, go and read some Infinite Crisis.
Okay. Jay, did you think?
Well, I guess I could say a few things.
You don't have to. I'm not guessing you. I couldn't tell.
But yeah, Superboy Prime, I read very little about him, but from what I understood, it was kind of interesting, kind of having him in the real world, and how that kind of messed him up a little bit, you know, to make him want to just stop punching holes in all the realities. And
Big time.
it just like shows you kind of how, I guess, an aspect how, you know, everything kind of just is in the DC universe, because like it makes it so that the writers really all people in the DC universe that are writing these storylines. Even I believe there was a panel of him going to the DC office and yelling at the writers like, "You did this to me, you assholes!"
And that the subtext there, of course, being that they are writing that story to make him do that. You know, and that was you're absolutely right.
And it's overall, you just gotta take it for what it is and enjoy the ride. If you don't enjoy the ride, you know, you don't have to get on the coaster.
Pretty much. And I mean, that's kind of comics, right?
Yeah, right.
It's comics on the whole.
Yeah. Everyone goes and grabs the comics they like.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful solution. You have words.
He's attacking the microphone.
So I kind of really like Superboy Prime, actually. I hate to say that, but I think Final Crisis Legion of Three Worlds was a really good comic. I thought Infinity Crisis was kind of mediocre. But one of the things that I do like about the character is back when they introduced him, he's supposed to be living in our real world, and he's actually a Kryptonian. His parents named him Clark Kent.
Yes.
He gets like bullied in school because his jerk-off parents named their kid Clark Kent.
Yes.
Like, that's screwed up. Don't name your kid Clark Kent, man. That's basically where, you know, that's all I had to say. Was
It's
names
an
their
awesome
kid
story.
Clark Kent.
It's an awesome story if you read it. I think it was supposed to be just like a one-off, like what if type story, you know. They find a baby in the woods. Okay, their name happens to be Kent. That's their family name, right? They name him Clark as a goof, right? Which is like, thanks mom, thanks dad. You know what I mean? For giving me that crazy name. Then later on in life, you know, he goes to a Halloween party or something like that, right? And just puts on a Superman costume, just sort of owning it. You know what I mean? Yeah. Bam, boom, pow! All of a sudden, he has Superman's powers, like from the made-up bullshit universe. You know what I mean? And then for the rest of his life, is forced to live in a world that he knows doesn't actually exist or didn't before that one stupid Halloween party. He's stuck there forever. Like, that's crazy, you know?
And I also think the writers kind of use him as a representation of fans.
You got it. Yeah.
Because the reason he breaks reality is because he's angry that the characters don't do what he wants them to.
Yes.
And after he gets his powers taken away at the end of Final Crisis, he literally just becomes an angry internet troll spamming the DC message boards being like, you guys suck.
Which I love.
Yeah.
If we're going to bring... Yeah, absolutely. They use it to yell at you, the reader.
Yeah.
Which is wonderful. It's like, leave us alone, you know? Like, is this what you want? Would you run through this universe tearing it apart with your bare hands? You know what I mean? Reassembling it in the way that you want it? Or you like this? I like that.
Yeah, I do too. I think that's real... overused to say, but it's really meta.
Yeah.
And,
well, this is before everybody was like meta was like everywhere. You know what I mean? Or at least before I'd been really overexposed to it. You know, and I still like the concept. I don't.
Yeah.
But it was before everybody was like using that word and rejecting it and not liking it in media and stuff. You know.
But no, I agree. Superboy Prime, pretty cool character.
Yeah. So that was supposed to be worst or something like that.
No, it's a wonderful case, Jim.
Tongue-bathed the guy.
Move on to your next one.
Go ahead.
Next one, honorable mention. This is a totally overlooked character. I know that people know who he is, but I don't see him discussed very much. He's a character named Prometheus. And I'm not going to be talking about the original version. I think he was originally a Teen Titans bad guy. But I'm going to be dealing with the one from the JLA from the late 90s, the Grant Morrison series, which is... Alright, I'm getting
some
gestures. Yeah. Basically, I love this dude. I love Grant Morrison and I love this character. He had a very short story in this JLA line. They brought him back recently. I didn't read it, but the pitch for him, like his origin story, is that he was raised by the sort of archetypal psycho hippie killers back in the day, right? Like during the counterculture days when Morrison himself was being raised by counterculture type people. You know, these two criminals are going around Bonnie and Clyde style, just, you know, killing people and being criminals and stuff, and they got their little kid in the backseat of their car as they travel across the country and do awful things. And throughout his childhood, he sees them, you know, fleeing from the police and being shot at by the cops and stuff like that. And he looks up to his parents. You know, of course, he sees his parents' actions as being good, and the actions of these people chasing after them in the suits and all that stuff as being bad. And the parents, you know, his parents tell him, they're coming to take us to justice. You know what I mean? That's why they're always shooting at us. That's why they're always, you know, doing all this bad stuff. That's why these people are terrorizing us. So he thinks in his head that justice is a place. You know what I mean? Like hell. You know, when these people finally catch up with him, that's what they're going to drag his parents off to, right? Finally, there's a big old shootout. His parents, spoilers, get killed, and you know, he sees his parents gunned down in front of him by law enforcement. Okay, so what you have is a reversal of basically Batman's origin story. Okay, now he, as a child, swears revenge against justice, whatever the hell that means. You know what I mean? Runs around in like classic Morrison style. He has other parts of his character that are just thrown at you like panel by panel by panel. He blows through it really quickly just to get to the story where he actually fights the Justice League. But he goes to Tibet, to the kingdom of Shambhala, which apparently in Grant Morrison world is a spaceship that's inside the Himalayan mountains, and all the like Tibetan monks that go there are probably descended from aliens. And in order to get down there, he has to walk down a whole bunch of steps. Then they give him the key to enlightenment inside this alien spaceship, which is sort of a parallel to Grant Morrison's story that he's always repeating about him being enlightened by going
1994 in Kathmandu.
You got it, man, in Kathmandu, right? So Grant Morrison goes up steps and gets enlightened good by good aliens. This guy goes down steps, gets enlightened bad by bad aliens, right? This is just like classic Grant Morrison self-insertion, except it's not, he doesn't come out and say that that's what he's doing. You know what I mean? Like, it's
not King Mob, it's more...
You got it. Yep, exactly. That's not even an important part of his character. It's just there. It's just lying there for anybody to see. He carries around a key that can shoot you into limbo. They don't even explain what that has to do with any of that, you know? Basically, Bizarro Batman before Bat-Zarro, subtextual Grant Morrison self-insertion. He also has a pipe that does stuff when he hits you with it. I don't know. It was awesome. Nobody ever talks about him. Go check it out.
Okay, wonderful case. You got words.
Yeah. As you know, if you heard the last episode, I'm like a huge Grant Morrison fan, and therefore big Prometheus fan. One of the things I like is you mentioned how he's kind of the anti-Batman as far as his parents getting killed by police rather than criminals, and so he swears revenge against justice rather than crime. One of the other ways that he's kind of cool anti-Batman is he gets his abilities, which he uses to defeat the Justice League, by literally downloading the abilities of League members, I think, to beat them.
Yes.
And that's like a very sharp contrast. Batman gets his abilities through years of training and hard work and, you know, mental willpower. He essentially cheats. He gains what Batman gained in over a lifetime in a matter of minutes by just downloading how various fighting masters fought and stuff. And I think that's really a kind of cool comparison, and may or may not be a shot at Captain America. I don't know.
I don't know about that.
But overall, I just think he's a really cool character. I know there have been a couple versions of him, both before and since, but that 90s JLA version is definitely the iconic one. If
it's the only one
Prometheus can be iconic.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the only one I'm even personally aware of. Like, in researching it, I now know that there were other versions, but I thought that was like a Morrison original. Like, I didn't even know that they had done them since or before or after, or anything like that, you know?
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's definitely provoked my interest in this mysterious character. Well, I'm strange that I haven't heard of him, because I did read some of Morrison JLA in the 90s, but never got to that point, I guess. So, but moving on to your final, your greatest, your best. James, enlighten us. Take us up the steps.
I went with Mr. Freeze as well, as like my personal favorite. He always has been ever since I was a kid. Luckily, I just went specifically with the animated version from the DC Animated Universe, just sticking purely to that continuity. So you gave us sort of like the big broad overview of Mr. Freeze as a whole, and I'm kind of narrowing it down, you know what I mean, to just that one snapshot. As you said, sort of reinvented in the cartoon for the cartoon, and then that version was subsequently used for a whole bunch of other stuff. But as a kid watching that cartoon, he was probably my first introduction to the idea of a sympathetic monster. You know, sort of like Frankenstein. You know, like he's this big evil creature, but they show you really well why he does what he does. He first appears in the episode Heart of Ice, and the question that they kind of pose to you is, why does the character violate social norm, and are they remorseful for it, right? And with Freeze, it's sort of surprisingly ambiguous. Like, he's always running around and talking about how his motive is oh, Nora, they took her from me, you know what I mean? Therefore, I feel nothing, right? So he's sort of almost like adopting apathy in the wake of loss, you know what I mean? Like a lot of Batman characters, you go through a traumatic experience, and unlike Batman, who overcomes and, grows stronger from the traumatic experience, you just sort of wallow in it, and it comes to define your entire life and everything you go and do. The weird thing about Freeze in the DCAU is that he's always talking about how cold his heart is, like Heart of Ice. and how he can't feel anything, just like a numb person. But he obviously has all this sentiment reserved for Nora, right? Like in the end of Heart of Ice, you see him sitting there, you know what I mean, with little Nora, little doll in his hand, and he's, always bitching about it. Later on in the cartoon series, Nora is brought back to life.
Really?
Which was his objective the entire time, right? She's completely horrified by what he's become, right?
Naturally.
His only link to his humanity comes back and is disgusted by the fact that he's become completely inhuman in the wake of losing her, which is really interesting. By that point, like, he's just a head, like, he doesn't have a body anymore.
Oh, really?
He's immortal, you know what I mean? But, again, can't feel anything. So he spiders off. They also bring him back in Batman Beyond.
Yeah.
Which so it's alright. I'm getting
that.
voices of approval here. I feel like I'm happy you guys know that, because I feel like a lot of people overlook that. It's one of the few things in Batman Beyond where they really strike straight line back to the continuity of the original series.
Yeah.
When he comes back in Batman Beyond, spoilers, but I gotta get there. They find a way to undo.
They restore.
Yes, they restore him. He's been frozen for like 50 years. You know what I mean? He can't die. They bring him back, and all of a sudden he can feel human emotion again. You know what I mean? His physical form is restored and all that stuff. And he's betrayed, by this chick again. So he loses everything and commits suicide. It's an awesome episode, and if you watch all the Freeze episodes from beginning to end inside the DCAU, it tells a complete story. There's a beginning, middle, end to it. There's a complete character arc that they spaced out over the course of like 10 years, which I think is really interesting and overlooked and cool. I guess that's it.
You sons of bitches.
I will say, like, watching his full character arc go is absolutely amazing. I do really like how they bring it back in Beyond. The way that when they actually go and they clone his body so that he can be a full person again, it's for the reason of, another villain. So he can also have a normal body again. And ultimately it goes and backfires. Just watching him as he goes and he turns back into human, regain all of his emotions, and then after he realizes that his body's reconverting back into his, icy, unsympathetic form, that he realizes that his life is absolutely for naught. He doesn't deserve to live in this world anymore. He just kind of decides to go and just one off, and it is absolutely wonderful because I believe, Terry McGinnis almost like tries to go and save him in the end. He goes and he realizes, this guy isn't actually like one of the big evil guys. He has a lot of sympathetic qualities to him. I'm not sure if you've ever read this comic, by the way. There's, I think, a comic book version where Nora also gets, revived again, but the way she gets revived is that she's thrown into a Lazarus pit.
No, I didn't know that happened.
And she goes absolutely batshit crazy and absolutely hates Victor and becomes like her own kind of assassin. And is absolutely nuts, causing him to go even further into his icy shell and causing him to pretty much be almost unsympathetic, just doing evil for the sake of doing evil.
Comics, folks.
Yep. But Chang,
going on, I did mention how, I definitely like the psychotic form of him, and the animated series Mr. Freeze is not my favorite, but it definitely was a great reimagining and a great story in of itself. Like you said, you can watch it from beginning to end. It has a complete storyline to it, and at the end of the day, it does, make your heart pound. You kind of feel for him.
Yeah.
And it definitely makes you want something good for him to happen, but see just everything get taken away from him. It's a very crushing story to you, and you really do feel his pain. You start to feel like your heart feels a little iced over from it.
You got it.
So
it's pretty heady stuff for like a children's cartoon.
Right.
You forget when you're watching Batman that this was intended for children. You know, it still doesn't.
What was it? It was on a primetime slot.
Yeah, you got it, man. Yeah.
I just had an idea, and it's kind of a big idea, and it might not be fully formed, so I might be babbling. But you mentioned how, like a lot of Batman villains, he has this tragedy that mirrors Batman's own tragedy.
Yeah.
And that while Batman doesn't let it affect his empathy, Freeze does and becomes cold-hearted or whatever.
Yeah.
When they bring him back in Batman Beyond, Bruce Wayne, who's spent his life fighting this guy, doesn't think there's anything worth saving about him. He thinks that there's no way Freeze is going to turn out to be a bad guy anyway, and that he needs to be stopped. McGinnis, who's had less personal experience with him, wants to help the guy, like you were saying, Dan. Now, it's almost like they've reversed roles, because by this point, Freeze has become sympathetic to the plights of others, whereas Wayne has become completely hardened because he's been fighting him for years, and where Wayne is the cold-hearted one at that point.
I never thought
And
about that.
when Freeze ultimately kind of has a redeeming moment, it's not just suicide. He goes down fighting Blight. He saves Terry from Blight.
Right.
So he kind of has one last hurrah to try and redeem himself. It's not the first time that happened either. There was another guy who tried to, a Walt Disney knockoff, that tried to make himself into a second Mr. Freeze, that he stops from doing so. And really, it's just, I think he does kind of redeem himself, and I think the way him and Batman almost switch roles at the end is really cool, and I never thought about it until you were just talking, you two were just talking about the Batman Beyond episodes.
That's awesome. No, that's pretty, yeah, they're like counterpoints to one another. I mean, because the best part of that entire series is seeing Bruce turn so bitter. You know, it's the best part about it, is just seeing him like lose that, you know, part of himself.
in Batman Beyond, you really do get the feel of how fighting these unsympathetic, absolute psychopaths really did take a strain on him.
Yeah.
And he really is a lot more bitter than he is in the original anime series.
I mean, the last time he saw Freeze was in New Batman Adventures, when you mentioned he got turned into only a head.
Yeah.
Freeze literally tries to murder his family. He's all like surrogate father, and Freeze is Alfred, surrogate son, Freeze is Robin, you know?
Yeah.
And like he's literally trying to kill Batman's family, and that's the only thing Batman values.
Right.
So by the time of Batman Beyond, Bruce has become completely cold-hearted and has no sympathy for
Chased
him.
all of his family away. All those people have now fled from
yeah.
him because of what he's turned into.
Alright. Any more thoughts on the Freezy Man? No, good.
Just overall, I'm kind of surprised we've had such few Batman villains on our tops.
Yeah, Joker and Magneto didn't make it. I like specifically avoided them because I felt like someone's gonna have Joker and someone's gonna have Magneto. So
Yeah, I'm surprised at the lists we had here today. Very, very pleased at the conversation that was produced. I would just pose one last question to you gentlemen before we put our weekly recommendations out. Supervillains, on the whole, what purpose do they serve for you in comics, and what kind of evolution do you see in them moving forward? Do you feel like they've retracted, they've taken steps back as time has passed in comics? Have they become more mundane? Or do you feel like they've become more complex, more interesting? What are your thoughts? First, Chang, what do you got?
Supervillains, they're just going to get better and better.
Okay.
We started out supervillains, as we said, with Sinestro, counterpoints to our hero, somebody for our heroes to beat, so we may be like, yes, good triumphs, we read a story that was fun. Now they're a lot more fleshed out. It started most likely with Batman the Animated Series.
True.
Just completely fleshing out our villains. We start to understand why they are villains, we feel for them, and at the end of the day, we see why they chose them. It's not just that they are evil, but something happened to make them evil, or they chose it, or something
Some would
to
say,
just make it more of just a counterpoint to our good guy. It's more like just another reflection of ourselves, actually, in kind of an extreme.
I think that for me, and I hate to disagree with you here, Chang.
No, go for
but
it.
You got to remember these aren't real. These are stories, and I think that where it's important for the story is that a villain reflect a specific motif in the story. And so, like, a good example would be Two-Face. I talked about this briefly last week, how he represents duality, which reflects on the duality of Batman himself, and is therefore a quality villain. I can go through almost every Batman villain, and they represent something different about the character of Batman and the story that he tells. It's his story, and I think that that's where the value is gained from it. Now, that's not to say I don't like it when villains are fully fleshed out. I think that, like I was saying with Luthor, the most valuable part of a villain is that all of his drive, all of his points are reflections of what we see in our hero.
Oh,
that's what makes a villain.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that's my entire opinion, but I do agree. Yeah, like sometimes, and I'm not just like doing this just to cover you, Hank, but some people would say, and I would say possibly, some villains nowadays attempt to be overly complex, and we kind of forget that this is comics. 1, 2, simplicity is sort of a path towards that sort of purity. You know, simplicity can be a high point. You know, a one-track, a very focused, concentrated villain who knows what he's doing, who knows what he is, has a very singular identity. No matter how corny or, you know, silly it might be, at least is a focused point. You know, like you said, it's an intentional direction of the character. And so villains that try to do too many things, that try to flesh themselves out. Oh, so, you know, Mr. X, you know, is trying to destroy the chemical plant because, you know, his mother died from chemical disease that these people produced, blah, 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 blah. You add all this later story and motif, and, like, sometimes it just waters down the simple purpose of the villain in the story, and which is to challenge the hero, to antagonize them, to bring out characteristics of them, and to symbolize something as instead of, you know, being this whole character that's a little irrelevant sometimes. What's up?
I think you misunderstood a little bit when I say flesh out. Like, it doesn't have to, like you said, maybe too fleshed out is, you know, too much. But when we start developing, you know, like you said with Two-Face, it represents his duality, but that's also something that they created over time. You know, that's not necessarily what they were
author's intention.
Right. So I think that came about because they were starting to do storylines that involved Batman more. We learned more about different characters, and I think that came about as an intention of theirs by actually going back and thinking about what these characters represent.
I don't necessarily agree with that, just because I like to think that those early comic guys, even if they were doing it to, you know, get their page rate or whatever, I think they were either A, layering in more symbolisms, they cared about, you know, doing what they did, or else that it was there underlying the whole time, and that it was maybe even them on a subconscious level.
That's true.
That injected some of these elements, but yeah.
Absolutely. There's definitely a shift in the very least that back then they were written mostly for kids, and now the reader base is pretty much adolescent and adult men. You know, I mean, that's going to change the way you write stuff quite a bit.
That's true too. The focal point has shifted over the last, you know, 75 years or so. So, Daniel?
I think villains are absolutely wonderful. You happen to, you know, live in an era, kind of like a golden age of villains, where, you know, you go and you see all of these, you know, evil bastards who are so likable in their evilness that they actually begin to go and carry their own comic books, which is absolutely lovely. You see just so many villains that, you know, oh wow, people really like that guy, you know, he's such a bastard, we should go and write something about him, and then they headline their own book. And I think that's really cool. It's kind of a shift in the dynamic and the way people think, just because, like, when you go and you watch anything when you're like a kid, obviously, you know, you're more attracted to the hero. I won't want to speak for everyone, but a lot of people are more attracted to be like, oh yeah, he beats up that bad guy, you know, and the villain is kind of the afterthought. You know, nowadays it's more like, wow, who he's fighting is extremely important. It's not important that he gets beat up by the superhero, but that the villain's intentions and the way that they go about doing things is absolutely important, and ends up striking the only thing. It ends up like showing this way of black and white. When you go and reverse it on its head, they can become sympathetic themselves. They can become, an ultimate character that is just more than their status as a villain, as a character, and I think that's just really strong nowadays. There's so many characters that can go and carry their own book, down to Venom being pretty much a superhero instead. Villains are so good, they're superheroes now.
Yeah.
Right.
They're barely ever on the side of, crime and justice or anything like that anymore. They're just all characters in an ensemble cast. I mean, that's very strange when you think about it,
I mean, that also kind of reflects all views, too. I mean, we nowadays, we want to understand why someone commits a crime.
That's true.
We have a lot of psych wards and stuff like that. So I think it very much reflects our society and how we're understanding things more, too.
Psych wars. That works out well, Arkham.
Well, gentlemen, that was wonderfully worded. And I think that about wraps up this week's topic of villains. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Before we head out, we will give you guys our weekly recommendations for issues in the comic universe. Anywhere, anything goes. Just what we love, what we feel you guys should be taking a look at. You guys feel free to take this as you will, but just our words for you. Mark, what have you got for us this week?
I think this week I'm going to recommend Trees. Try issue number 6. It's the most recent one by Warren Ellis. I'm not sure who the artist is. It's coming out from Image Comics currently. The basic premise is a group of hyper advanced aliens arrive on Earth, and they just appear to be giant trees, and they don't recognize life on Earth as life, and so they just kind of go about their business while the humans each try and turn them to their advantage or fear the consequences of messing with them. And it's really kind of a cool book and a thought-provoking book, especially if you're someone that likes space and thinking about, is there extraterrestrial life? Well, there very well could be in some way that we can't even recognize.
Very cool, very cool. Dan?
I'm going to go on mine.
Yep.
So
Good point.
Time restraints. But I recommend Fables. All of it. Read it now. Fables is the best comic I've read in a while. And it's ending soon, so now's the time. You can go ahead, just wait a little bit while longer, and you should be able to grab it all.
Thank you, Chan. Absolutely. Mr. Jamesman.
Miracle Man. They're reprinting it, finally. Read it. It's Alan Moore before he did everything else, but it's amazing. It's the best superhero comic ever written. They're reprinting it. You can actually buy it now. Read it. It's good. I'll give it to you, actually. Just read it.
Just contact us.
Miracle Man. Buy it.
Dan.
I believe you guys should be reading East of West by Jonathan Hickman and Nick Dragotta. It's absolutely lovely. If you go and you dig futuristic, Western adventures with the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, primarily following death and, cultists and shit like that, it's just a really, really cool series, of course, done by, Image, and I'm absolutely enjoying it. I do believe that there's a second season of it, but, how much they put out is absolutely awesome. And the trade paperbacks, just for having intro trades, they're only $10 a pop. So you definitely deserve to go and read yourself some East of West by Jonathan Hickman.
Thank you, Dan. Wonderful. And my recommendation for you guys this week is something a little more current. It is Batgirl, issue 35. The soft reboot of the New 52 continuity of the character of Batgirl, Barbara Gordon. I feel like this is a legitimate reboot, something where I feel like the New 52 should have started at, because nothing against Gail Simone's run against Batgirl, but I really feel like this is a more truer, when I say truer, I mean true innovation in the character and in the aesthetic of Batgirl. She's really brought into the 21st century with with technology, with her interactions. She acts more like a girl these days. More like she deals with a lot more like a college issues. You know, social media, people interacting with her at parties. Having the college life while still managing the Batgirl, attitude. I love the new art by Babs Tarr. The new look is very fresh. It pops. It's very modern, and you guys should all give it a look. It's very, very nice read. But yeah, I think that wraps us all up for this week's Paper Cuts podcast. It was a long one, 2-parter most likely when it gets down to editing. As always, like us, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you thought. If you guys have anything to say to us, we're always willing to listen. Send us an email down below. Everything we talked about today will be in the description as far as information as where you can pick up all these amazing books. And I think that's about it. You guys have anything to say before we head out?
Good night and good luck.
Good night, good luck, good life. You guys have a good time.